At 61, Melinda Gates confesses the real reason behind the divorce. She stood beside one of the richest men on the planet for 27 years. She smiled for cameras. She raised 3 children. She ran a foundation that saved millions of lives around the world. From the outside, Melinda Gates had everything. A famous husband, billions of dollars, a legacy that most people could only dream about. But in May 2021, she walked away from all of it. And the world could not believe what they were seeing. The divorce was shocking enough. But what came after was even more surprising. Melinda stayed quiet for a long time. She did not run to cameras. She did not give angry interviews. She did not post emotional messages. She simply disappeared into her new life. And people talked. They whispered. They guessed. Was it the affairs? Was it the money? Was it Jeffrey Epstein? Nobody knew for sure. Because Melinda was not ready to talk yet. Then in 2025, at 61 years old, she finally opened her mouth. And what she said stopped people cold. She talked about a meeting in 2013 that made her physically sick. She talked about lies that kept building for years like a wall she could not see around. She talked about panic attacks in the middle of the night and nightmares that would not go away. And she confessed the real reason she left. Not the version people had been guessing about. The real one. The one that had been locked inside her for years. But to understand why she left, you first have to understand who she was before she ever met Bill Gates. Because Melinda French did not arrive at that marriage as someone who needed to be rescued. She arrived as someone who had been building herself up since she was a little girl. She was born on August 15, 1964, in Dallas, Texas. She grew up in a house where working hard was not a choice. It was just what you did. Her father was an aerospace engineer who helped put Americans on the moon during the Apollo years. Her mother ran the home with steady values and warm routines. They were comfortable, not rich. And when her father realized that 4 children meant 4 college tuitions, he did something smart. He started a rental property business in the late 1970s. And young Melinda was going to help. By the time she was 10, she had a paintbrush in her hand on weekends. She scrubbed floors. She learned how to fix small things. She watched how responsibility felt lighter when a family worked together. And that lesson went deep into her. By 12, she was doing bookkeeping. Real numbers. Real records. Most kids her age were playing outside. She was balancing accounts. Not because someone forced her, but because she understood that every apartment she helped clean meant one more semester of college paid for later. Then something happened that changed everything. Her father brought home an Apple II computer. She was 14, and that slow blinking cursor pulled her in like nothing else ever had. She taught herself to code. She wrote simple programs to manage rental records. Very few girls were touching computers in the late 1970s. But she did not care about what was normal. She cared about logic. She cared about the way the machine responded to her ideas. It did not judge her. It only cared if her thinking was correct. And she loved that. She carried that love all the way to Ursuline Academy, where she graduated as valedictorian in 1982. Then she went to Duke University and walked into classrooms where she was often the only woman studying computer science. Male students shouted answers. The energy was sharp and loud and sometimes intimidating. But she pushed through. By 1987, at just 23 years old, she had both a computer science degree and her MBA. And she was ready for the world. She turned down a safe job at IBM and did something bold instead. She joined a smaller, hungrier company in Seattle, a company called Microsoft. And that decision, she would later say, changed everything. When she walked through those doors in August 1987, she was not Bill Gates' future wife. She was a sharp young product manager with ideas and the discipline to follow through on them. She worked on multimedia products that were still brand new territory. She helped build Cinemania, a movie guide on CD-ROM that sold over 200,000 copies in its first year. She led the team behind Encarta, one of the most important digital encyclopedias ever made, which sold over 1 million copies by 1995 and sat in homes and schools around the world. She helped pioneer Expedia, the travel booking platform that by 2025 would generate over $13 billion in annual revenue. These were not small things. These were products that millions of real people used in their real lives. And she built them. But behind the work, something personal was quietly growing. She and Bill had started dating in 1987. They kept it secret because of workplace rules. 3 years later, that relationship had become something neither of them could ignore. On January 1st, 1994, they married on the Hawaiian island of Lanai in a small ceremony with about 20 guests. She walked into that marriage with her eyes open. She negotiated a strong prenuptial agreement. She was not going to be a trophy. She was going to be an equal. And for a while, it really did feel that way. By 1996, she was managing over 1,700 people at Microsoft. She was one of the most powerful women in technology. But she was also pregnant. And she made a choice. She left Microsoft to raise her children. That was her decision, not Bill's, hers. Because she believed that being present for her family was just as important as anything she had built inside a corporate office. And that tells you something important about who she was. After leaving Microsoft, she and Bill began building something even bigger together. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation started small, but grew fast. By the early 2000s, the couple had already put around $20 billion into it. She co-chaired the foundation and helped steer it into areas that changed the world. Vaccines in Pakistan brought polio cases down by more than 90% between 1994 and 2015. India was declared polio-free in 2014. Over 80 million unintended pregnancies were prevented across Africa. Hundreds of thousands of lives were saved through maternal health programs. This was not Bill's foundation with Melinda's name attached. This was hers too. Every strategy, every decision, every trip to clinics in Zambia and Tanzania where she walked among mothers who had no access to basic care. That work was real, and it cost her something, because while she was saving lives around the world, her own life was quietly falling apart. And she did not see it coming all at once. It happened slowly, like a leak in a wall that you do not notice until the whole thing starts to crumble. The first real crack appeared in 2017. A woman who worked at a business partly connected to the Gates family accused Bill's longtime money manager of sexual harassment. Most powerful men in that situation would have made the problem disappear quietly. Melinda did not let that happen. She pushed for an outside investigation. She demanded accountability. She was not going to pretend this was nothing. That was the moment she began to feel something shifting in her. She had spent years absorbing problems quietly, but she was not going to do that anymore. Then came 2019, and everything got worse. Microsoft's own board began investigating Bill. A female engineer came forward and said she had been involved in a long relationship with him that started back in 2000. The board hired outside lawyers. Microsoft later confirmed that Bill had indeed sought a relationship with that employee. Bill quietly left the Microsoft board in early 2020. He said it was to focus on philanthropy. But people close to the situation said the investigation played a major role. For Melinda, this was not just betrayal. It was the crumbling of something she had trusted for over 2 decades. But the moment that broke her, the moment she has talked about more than any other, happened years before any of this became public. In September 2013, Melinda accompanied Bill to Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse in New York. They were in the city that day to receive a public service award. And then they went to meet this man. She later said that visit made her feel physically sick. She described Epstein as evil personified. She said she regretted walking through that door the moment she walked through it. And she told Bill exactly how she felt. She made it clear that this relationship was a serious problem. She expected him to listen. She expected him to step away. But he did not. He kept meeting with Epstein, even after Epstein was already a convicted sex offender, even after Melinda had told him how deeply it disturbed her. And that, she said, was when something inside her broke. Not cracked, broke. Because it was not just about Epstein. It was about the fact that Bill chose to keep meeting with him even knowing how Melinda felt. That told her something about their marriage that she could not unknow. By late 2019, she had already begun talking to divorce lawyers quietly. In her 2025 memoir, she revealed that the separation played out in secret for more than a year before anyone in the world found out. She was going through panic attacks, nightmares she could not shake, a feeling that the life she had built around her husband was no longer solid ground. A trip to New Mexico in late 2019 brought everything to a breaking point. Friends say she went through what felt like a waking nightmare, a kind of breakdown that showed just how deep the damage had gone. When she came back from that trip, she was done. In May 2021, the announcement came. After 27 years of marriage and 3 children, Bill and Melinda Gates were divorcing. The settlement was reported to be worth around $76 billion, making it one of the most expensive divorces in history. But Melinda has said more than once that money was never the point. After the divorce was finalized in August 2021, she pledged $1 billion over 2 years for women's health and empowerment. She continued building Pivotal Ventures, her own investment company focused on women and girls, which by 2025 had put hundreds of millions of dollars into more than 150 organizations. In May 2024, she stepped down from the Gates Foundation entirely, leaving Bill as sole chair. She walked away from the shared platform she had helped build for over 2 decades. Because she was done sharing. She was ready to build something that was entirely her own. In April 2025, she released her memoir called The Next Day. She wrote plainly and honestly. She said the divorce was necessary because honesty and trust had broken down completely. She wrote that intimacy is impossible when dishonesty sits in the middle of a relationship. She described her panic attacks. She described how therapy helped her rebuild herself piece by piece. She described learning how to respond to betrayal without betraying her own values. She also went on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert that same year. Sitting there in front of millions of viewers at 61 years old, she was calm. She was clear. She said she had to leave because there was not enough honesty to hold the marriage together. She said therapy saved her. And she said that she is now, finally, in a pretty great relationship. Watching her speak, people saw something they had not quite seen before. Not the foundation co-chair. Not Bill Gates' wife. Not the woman behind the logo. They saw Melinda French, the girl from Dallas who had been building herself up since she was 10 years old, and who had somehow, after all of it, found her way back to herself. Because here's the thing about Melinda Gates that most people miss when they talk about the divorce and the billions and the betrayal. She was never waiting to be saved. She left Microsoft on her own terms. She built her own company. She saved millions of lives. She negotiated her own prenup. She pushed for accountability when powerful men tried to hide their behavior. She walked away from a 27-year marriage when she knew it was over. And at 61, she stood in front of the world and told the truth. That is not a woman who was broken by her divorce. That is a woman who was always this strong. We just did not know it yet.